Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the polished floor of Zenith Station, his boots making soft sounds against the metallic surface that seemed to glow with its own inner light. The station was massive, stretching out in all directions like a small city floating in space. Hundreds of alien species moved through the wide corridors, their forms ranging from towering giants to small floating creatures that glowed with bioluminescent patterns. Jake had seen pictures and videos during his training, but nothing prepared him for the reality of standing among beings from across the galaxy. He adjusted his uniform and walked toward the meeting point, where his fellow humans waited. Amy Carter spotted him first and waved, her red hair catching the strange purple light that illuminated this section of the station. Standing beside her were Ben Hayes and Lisa Park, the other members of their small diplomatic team. They looked as overwhelmed as Jake felt, but they all wore professional expressions. This mission was too important to show weakness. A deep rumbling voice cut through the ambient noise of the station. So, these are the humans. Jake turned to see a massive figure approaching. Commander Vexter stood nearly 9 feet tall, his body covered in natural armor plating that looked like polished obsidian. His forearms moved with casual grace, and his eyes glowed with an orange light that seemed to evaluate and dismiss Jake in the same moment. Behind him walked several other Corthan officers, each one imposing and clearly unimpressed by the human delegation. "I am Commander Vexter of the Corthan Imperial Defense Force," the alien continued, his translator making his words sound hollow and mechanical. "I have been assigned to escort your delegation during your stay on Zenith Station, though I cannot imagine why your species requires such attention." Amy stepped forward, her diplomatic training kicking in despite the obvious insult. "We appreciate your time, Commander," she said with a polite smile. "Humanity is eager to learn from the galactic community and establish peaceful relations." Vexter made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter, though it sounded more like grinding metal. "Learn from us," he repeated, looking at his fellow Corthans. "Your species has barely mastered basic space travel, while civilizations here have been crossing galaxies for thousands of your years. You have no natural defenses, no enhanced abilities, nothing that would mark you as noteworthy among the stars." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but kept his expression neutral. He had been warned that some species would look down on humanity. The galaxy operated on a hierarchy based on technology, physical prowess, and psionic abilities. Humans had none of these advantages, at least not in the way the aliens measured them. The tour began with Vexter leading them through the commercial district where merchants from across the galaxy sold goods that seemed impossible by human standards: weapons that could disintegrate matter, medical devices that regrew limbs in minutes, ships that could cross solar systems in days. Ben asked questions about trade possibilities, but Vexter barely responded, treating each inquiry as a waste of his time. They passed through a large plaza where several alien species had gathered around a holographic display. The display showed combat footage from various worlds, warriors from different civilizations, demonstrating their abilities. A Zentari fighter moved with incredible speed, dodging energy blasts that would have vaporized a Humanodrexian soldier, coordinated with a dozen copies of itself, their hive mind allowing perfect synchronization. "This is the Arena Memorial," Vexter explained with obvious pride. "Here we honor warriors who have proven themselves in the combat arena. Every species worth mentioning has representatives here, though I doubt humans will ever earn such distinction." Lisa bristled at the comment. "Humans have survived wars, diseases, and environmental disasters that would destroy most species," she said firmly. "We may not have armor or telepathy, but we endure." Vexter stopped walking and turned to face her, his massive form casting a shadow over the entire human group. "Endurance means nothing without strength. he said coldly. Your world gave you no advantages. No tools for survival beyond your fragile flesh and limited senses. You are prey species that got lucky enough to develop technology before something ate you. The other aliens in the plaza had stopped to watch the exchange. Some looked amused while others seemed uncomfortable with Vexthor's open hostility. Jake noticed a reptilian alien approaching from the crowd, his scaled skin gleaming green and gold under the station lights. Perhaps we should test this theory, the reptilian said, his voice carrying a hissing quality, even through the translator. I am Krath of the Varax Dominion. I challenge your delegation to a demonstration in the arena. Let us see if human endurance means anything against true strength. Amy shot Jake a worried look. This was exactly the kind of situation they had hoped to avoid. The arena challenges were common in galactic politics. A way for species to establish dominance and trading hierarchy. Refusing would mark humanity as weak and unworthy of respect. But accepting seemed like suicide. Thor laughed again, clearly enjoying the humans' discomfort. The prey species will decline. Of course, he said to Krath. They know their place. Something in Jake snapped. Not anger exactly, but a cold calculation. He had studied the briefings, watched the combat footage, and analyzed the patterns. Every species in the galaxy had advantages, but they also had blind spots, weaknesses created by relying too heavily on their natural gifts. I accept, Jake said quietly. The plaza went silent. Amy grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with concern. Jake, you can't be serious, she whispered. We're here to establish trade relations, not get you killed. But Jake was already walking toward Krath, his posture relaxed and confident. He had spent 15 years in special operations, facing enemies with better weapons, better numbers, and better positions. He survived because he adapted, because he found weaknesses, because humans had spent millennia learning to beat opponents who should have crushed them. The arena then, Krath said with obvious satisfaction. Tomorrow at midday cycle, all of Zenith Station will see what happens when primitive species challenge their betters. Vexthor looked almost disappointed that the human had accepted. He had wanted them to refuse, to prove his point about human weakness. Now he would have to watch one of them get humiliated in front of the entire station. Jake met the commander's glowing eyes without flinching. Tomorrow, he agreed as the crowd dispersed and Vexthor led them toward their quarters. Ben moved close to Jake. Do you have a plan? He asked quietly. Jake watched the aliens moving through the station, studying their movements and interactions. I always have a plan, he replied. These species have relied on their natural advantages for so long they have forgotten what it means to truly adapt. Tomorrow they are going to learn why humans became the apex predators on Earth without claws, fangs, or armor. Amy still looked worried, but she knew better than to argue. Once Jake made a decision, they reached their assigned quarters, a modest set of rooms that felt claustrophobic after the vast spaces of the station. As the door sealed behind them, Lisa finally spoke. You really think you can beat a Varax warrior? Jake sat down and began reviewing the combat footage on his personal device, analyzing Krath's movements and fighting style. I don't think I can beat him, Jake said calmly. I know I can, because while he has been relying on genetic enhancements and natural weapons, I've been studying every possible way to take down an opponent who's bigger and stronger than me. That is what humans do. We overcome. The combat arena occupied an entire level of Zenith Station, a massive circular space with transparent walls that allowed spectators to watch from all angles. Jake walked through the entrance tunnel, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes on him from dozens of different species. The crowd noise was overwhelming, a mixture of sounds that no human throat could make. Clicks and whistles and harmonic tones that created an alien symphony of anticipation. Amy, Ben, and Lisa watched from the human delegation box. their faces tight with worry around them. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to witness what most expected to be a quick and embarrassing defeat for the primitive. Specious Vexter stood in the Corthan section, his arms crossed over his massive chest. His expression unreadable. Jake reached the center of the arena floor, a smooth surface that seemed to absorb and reflect light at the same time across from him. Krath emerged from the opposite tunnel. The Varax warrior was even more impressive up close, his 7-foot frame packed with enhanced muscle that rippled under his scaled skin, his claws extended and retracted in anticipation, each one sharp enough to cut through steel. The arena master, a floating spherical alien covered in sensors, drifted to the center. Combat will continue until submission or incapacitation, it announced in a voice that bypassed translators and spoke directly into the minds of everyone present. Lethal force is prohibited. All other methods are acceptable. Combatants acknowledge. Acknowledged, Krath hissed, his reptilian eyes fixed on Jake with predatory focus. Acknowledged, Jake said calmly, rolling his shoulders to loosen the tension. The arena master floated upward, and the starting signal flashed across. Every display Krath exploded into motion with terrifying speed, his enhanced muscles launching him across the arena floor like a missile. The crowd roared their approval as the Varax warrior closed the distance in less than 2 seconds. His claws extended for a strike that would end the fight immediately. Jake didn't move the way Krath expected. Most opponents either dodged backward or tried to block, relying on their own enhancements or natural armor instead. Jake shifted his weight and slipped to the side with minimal movement, letting Krath's momentum carry him past. It was a technique refined over thousands of years of human martial arts. Efficiency over power, using an opponent's strength against them. Krath spun with impressive agility and struck again, his claws whistling through the air. Jake ducked under the swing and moved inside Krath's reach. Too close for the long claws to be effective, his hand shot out in a precise strike to a cluster of scales on Krath's lower ribcage. The Varax warrior jerked and stumbled, clearly surprised that the human had found a nerve cluster that even most Varax didn't know about. The crowd's noise shifted from excitement to confusion. This wasn't going the way anyone expected. Vexter leaned forward in his viewing box, his glowing eyes narrowing as he watched Jake move. The human's footwork was economical and precise, never wasting energy on unnecessary movements. Krath snarled and came at Jake with a combination of strikes, his claws cutting through the air in a pattern that should have been impossible to avoid. But Jake was already reading the pattern, his brain processing the movements and predicting the next strike before Krath fully committed to it. This was what humans had evolved to do on their death world, where every predator was faster and stronger. They learned to read intention, to spot the micro-movements that telegraphed an attack, to turn prediction into survival. Jake slipped between the strikes, his body flowing like water around stone when an opening appeared. He struck with surgical precision at another weak point, this time a joint where armor plating met flexible tissue. Krath roared in frustration and pain. This was supposed to be easy, a demonstration of Varax superiority over a species with no natural weapons. Instead, the human was taking him apart piece by piece, finding vulnerabilities that shouldn't exist. The warrior charged again, abandoning technique for raw aggression. Jake waited until the last possible moment and dropped low, sweeping Krath's leading leg with perfect timing. The Varax warrior's own momentum betrayed him, his enhanced mass working against him as he crashed to the arena floor. Before Krath could recover, Jake was on him, applying a joint lock that leveraged the Varax's own body weight against the structural limitations of his shoulder joint. It was a hold that worked on humans, and Jake had bet that alien anatomy, for all its enhancements, still followed certain mechanical principles. Submit, Jake said quietly, his voice calm despite the physical exertion. Krath struggled, his superior strength nearly breaking the hold. but Jake adjusted his position with practiced ease. Increasing the pressure, the choice was clear. Tap out or suffer a dislocated shoulder that would take weeks to heal, even with advanced medical technology. Jake's hand slapped the arena floor 3 times. The universal signal of submission. The arena fell silent for a long moment, as if the entire station needed time to process what had just happened. Then the noise exploded. Some species cheering while others expressed shock and disbelief in their own unique ways. Jake released the hold and stood, offering his hand to help Krath up. The Varax warrior stared at the offered hand for a moment, then took it, allowing Jake to help him to his feet. "How did you know my weak points?" Krath asked, his translator conveying genuine confusion. "I watched you move," Jake replied. "Every species has patterns, vulnerabilities created by the very advantages they rely on. Humans spent millions of years as prey. We learned to find those weaknesses or we died in the viewing boxes." The reactions were varied. Amy was crying with relief, while Ben and Lisa were cheering and hugging each other. The human delegation had just earned respect in the most fundamental way the galaxy understood. Through combat, Vexter stood frozen, his forearms hanging at his sides as he processed what he had witnessed. The human hadn't won through superior strength or technology or any natural advantage. He won through skill, through understanding, through the kind of adaptability that the Corthans had lost somewhere in their millennia of relying on their natural armor and weapons. A Centauri female approached the commander's viewing box, her crystalline features reflecting the arena lights. "You told me humans were primitive," she said, her voice carrying an amused tone. "That was the most sophisticated combat technique I have seen in decades." He treated his opponent like a puzzle to be solved, rather than an enemy to be overpowered. Vexter couldn't respond. His worldview had just been shattered by a species he had dismissed as barely worthy of attention below in the arena. Officials were swarming around Jake, scanning him with various devices and asking questions in multiple languages. Krath stood nearby, rotating his shoulder and watching the human with a new expression. "That looked like respect. Your species must be formidable warriors." The Varax said. Jake shook his head. "We are formidable survivors," he corrected. "There is a difference. Warriors rely on their advantages. Survivors learn to overcome disadvantages. Humanity became the dominant species on Earth, not because we were the strongest or fastest or most deadly, but because we refused to accept limitations." The arena master floated down to make the official announcement. Though everyone already knew the result, victory to Jake Morrison of Earth, it proclaimed, "Let it be recorded that humanity has demonstrated combat proficiency worthy of galactic recognition." As Jake walked back toward the exit tunnel, he glanced up at the Corthan viewing box. Vexter was watching him with an expression that was no longer dismissive or amused. It was something closer to concern, or perhaps the beginning of understanding. The commander had spent his entire life believing that natural advantages determined superiority, that species were locked into hierarchies based on their evolutionary gifts. But this human had just proven that adaptability and intelligence could overcome raw physical power. And if one human could do this, what could billions of them accomplish once they fully integrated into galactic society? The thought was both fascinating and terrifying. Jake passed through the tunnel and was immediately engulfed by his fellow humans, all talking at once and congratulating him. He accepted their praise with quiet humility, but his mind was already moving forward. This victory was just the beginning, the first step in changing how the galaxy saw humanity as they made their way back to their quarters through corridors now filled with aliens who stepped aside respectfully. Jake knew that everything had changed. The galaxy had underestimated humans because they saw only what humans lacked. Now they would begin to see what humans possessed: the ability to adapt, to learn, to overcome any challenge through intelligence and determination, and that Jake thought was far more powerful than any natural weapon or armor could ever be. Security analysts, the other species began nodding or expressing agreement in their own ways. Even no news of Jake's capabilities spread through Zenith Station faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours of the test results being released, every major government and corporation in the galaxy had received detailed reports about human adaptability. The reactions were predictably mixed. Some species saw opportunity, while others saw threat. Jake had just finished a training session with 3 Corthan officers when he returned to his quarters. Exhausted but satisfied with their progress, the Corthans were struggling to think outside their natural advantages. But they were making progress. He palmed open his door and stepped inside. Immediately sensing something wrong, the air pressure felt different. Subtle but noticeable, and the temperature had dropped by several degrees. Years of survival training kicked in automatically. Jake's muscles tensed and his senses sharpened as he scanned the room without appearing to do so. Everything looked normal. His belongings were where he left them. The lights were set to his preferred dim setting. The datapad on his desk was still, displaying the training schedule he had been reviewing that morning. But something was definitely wrong. Jake moved slowly toward the center of the room, keeping his movements casual while his brain processed every detail. A faint shimmer near the ceiling caught his attention. So brief, he almost missed it. Active camouflage. Military grade from the looks of it. Most species that use such technology relied entirely on its effectiveness, becoming careless because they assumed invisibility meant safety. But Jake's survival instinct was honed on a world where the deadliest predators were often invisible until they struck. He continued walking as if he noticed nothing, moving toward the desk while calculating angles and distances. The shimmer had been near the corner, which meant the attacker was probably waiting for him to settle into a vulnerable position before striking. His hand reached for the datapad, but his weight was already shifting, ready to move. The attack came from behind and above, exactly as Jake predicted. Neural disruptor blast scorched the air where his head had been a moment before. But Jake was already diving forward, rolling under the desk and grabbing his share in one smooth motion. The camouflage flickered as the attacker moved, revealing a thin gray-skinned figure with large black eyes. A Drexian assassin, probably sent by one of the more militant nodes who saw humans as a threat. Jake threw the chair at the assassin's position, not expecting to hit but forcing a reaction. The Drexian twisted to avoid the improvised weapon, and the camouflage failed completely as the system struggled to compensate for the rapid movement. Jake saw his opponent clearly now, armed with a neural disruptor in one hand and some kind of blade weapon in the other. Standard Drexian combat equipment from what he remembered in his briefings. The assassin fired again, but Jake was already moving, using the limited space of his quarters to his advantage in open combat. The Drexian's superior technology would win. But in close quarters, human adaptability became the greater advantage. Jake grabbed a metal tray from his desk and used it to deflect the next disruptor blast. The energy scorching the tray's surface but reflecting away harmlessly, closed the distance between them in 3 quick steps. Getting inside the range where the disruptor was less effective, the assassin struck with the blade. A precise attack aimed at Jake's throat, but Jake had been watching the alien's body language, reading the micro-movements that telegraphed the strike. He blocked the blade arm with his forearm, accepting the shallow cut in exchange for control of the weapon, then delivered a devastating elbow strike to the Drexian's thorax. The alien gasped, clearly not expecting such decisive close-quarters combat from a species with no natural weapons. Drexians fought through hive coordination and superior technology, not individual skill. This one had probably never faced an opponent who could read and counter its movements so quickly. Jake followed up with a sweep that took the assassin's legs out from under it, and before the alien could recover, he had the disruptor weapon pinned against the floor under his knee and his hand pressed against the Drexian's throat. Move and I crush your windpipe," Jake said quietly, his voice cold and controlled despite the adrenaline pumping through his system. The assassin froze, its large black eyes wide with shock. The door burst open and Vexter rushed in with 4 security officers, their weapons drawn and ready. The commander took in the scene immediately, Jake kneeling over a partially camouflaged Drexian assassin, the scorched walls showing evidence of disruptor fire, and Jake's forearm bleeding from the blade strike. "Stand down," Vexter ordered, though it was unclear if he was talking to his officers or Jake released the assassin and stepped back. Letting the security team secure the prize, Inertula arrived moments later, her crystalline features reflecting the emergency lighting that had activated automatically. "How did you detect it?" she asked immediately, pulling up scans on her device. "The camouflage system is military grade, specifically designed to fool multi-spectrum sensors." Jake sat down heavily, the adrenaline starting to fade and leaving exhaustion in its wake. "Temperature differential," he explained. "The camouflage system generates heat, and when it entered my quarters, it changed the ambient temperature by a few degrees. Then there were the air currents, something that size moving disrupts airflow in noticeable ways if you are paying attention." Vexter ordered the Drexian to be taken to a secure holding facility, then turned to Jake with an expression that mixed respect and concern. "You were ready for this." The commander observed Jake, nodded slowly. "I knew the test results would create political problems. Some species would see humans as potential allies. Others would see us as threats. The Drexians value predictability and conformity. So yeah, I was ready." Amy rushed in with Ben and Lisa right behind her, all 3 looking panicked. "Jake, we heard there was an attack," Amy said, her eyes scanning him for injuries. "I'm fine," Jake assured her, though his bleeding arm suggested otherwise. "Just another day, proving that humans can survive what we are not supposed to survive." Tyler was examining the scorch marks and running detailed scans of the room. "This was a sanctioned assassination," she announced, her voice grim. "The equipment and techniques are consistent with Drexian collective protocols. This was not a rogue agent. The implications hung heavy in the air if the Drexian collective had officially sanctioned Jake's assassination. It meant they viewed humans as enough of a threat to violate Zenith Station's diplomatic immunity protocols. This could spark a serious political crisis. Vexter's expression darkened. "The collective has overstepped," he said coldly. "An attack on a registered diplomatic delegate in neutral space is an act that cannot be ignored. I will bring this before the Galactic Council immediately. Over the next 12 hours, Zenith Station became a hotbed of political maneuvering. The Drexian collective initially denied involvement, but Tyler's evidence was overwhelming. Multiple species began choosing sides, some supporting humanity's right to galactic integration, others agreeing with the Drexians that humans represented an unpredictable element. The human delegation worked around the clock, with Amy coordinating with sympathetic species while Ben and Lisa prepared legal arguments for the council hearing. Jake found himself in the unusual position of being the center of galactic political attention. Sophie Chun arrived from Earth as an emergency reinforcement, a senior diplomat with decades of experience in complex negotiations. She was a calm, measured woman in her 60s who immediately took command of the situation with quiet authority. The assassination attempt was a mistake on their part, Sophie told the human delegation during a strategy session. It shows fear, and fear means they recognize our value even if they do not want to admit it. We use this. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, a rare occurrence that drew representatives from hundreds of species. The council chamber was a massive sphere that allowed species of all sizes and environmental needs to participate simultaneously. Sophie stood at the human delegation platform, her image projected throughout the chamber so all could see her. Members of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice calm but firm. Humanity came to this station seeking peaceful integration. We disclosed our capabilities honestly and submitted to extensive testing to address concerns about our species. A projection shifted to show footage of the assassination attempt, captured by Jake's quarter security systems. In response, we faced an assassination attempt sanctioned by a member of this very council. Sophie continued. The Drexian collective attempted to murder a diplomatic representative on neutral ground because they feared what humans might become. Node 7, representing the Drexians, attempted to interject, but Sophie held up her hand. "Let me finish," she said with steel in her voice. "Humanity evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We survived predators, diseases, environmental disasters, and each other. We learned to adapt because adaptation was the only path to survival." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Some of you fear this adaptability." She continued. "You see humans as chaos in your ordered galaxy, but what you call chaos, we call evolution. The galaxy is not static. It changes. New species emerge. New technologies develop. New challenges arise that none of us can predict." Sophie's projection showed images of humans working alongside Allie. Jake was reviewing trade documents in his quarters when the door chimed with a visitor alert. He opened it to find a Zentari female standing in the corridor, her crystalline body refracting the station lights into rainbow patterns across the wall. She wore the uniform of station security, and her expression was difficult to read on features that seemed more like living gemstone than flesh. "Jake Morrison?" she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that the translator struggled to capture. "I am Tyler Kane, Senior Security Analyst for Zenith Station. I need to speak with you about your performance in the arena yesterday." Jake stepped aside to let her enter. Immediately alert security visits were rarely good news, especially when humans were still trying to establish themselves in Galactic HFY. Attila glanced around the modest quarters before focusing her attention back on Jake. "During the combat, all participants are monitored for safety reasons," she began, pulling up a holographic display from her wrist device. "Biometric data, neural activity, reaction times, all recorded and analyzed. Your readings are causing considerable concern among my superiors." "Concern?" Jake asked. Keeping his voice neutral, Tella manipulated the display, showing graphs and charts that meant nothing to Jake's untrained eye. "Your neural activity during the fight was extraordinary," she explained. "Pattern recognition scores that rival our best AI systems. Reaction time calculations that predicted opponent movements before they fully committed to them. And stress hormone regulation that suggests exceptional mental control." She looked at him with eyes that seemed to glow from within. "The initial assessment of humans listed you as a primitive species with no notable abilities. But your performance suggests otherwise. What are you hiding?" Before Jake could respond, the door chimed again. This time it was Vexter, accompanied by 2 other Corthan officers and, surprisingly, Annie and Ben from the human delegation. The commander's expression was serious, but no longer dismissive. "I apologize for the intrusion," Vexter said, though his tone made it clear this wasn't really a request. "But several galactic governments are demanding answers about human capabilities. Your victory yesterday has raised questions that need addressing." Amy stepped forward, her diplomatic instincts taking over despite the tense situation. "Commander, we've been transparent about our species from the beginning," she said firmly. "If there are concerns, we are happy to address them through proper channels." "Proper channels take time," another voice said from the doorway. A tall, thin alien with gray skin and enormous black eyes entered the room. Jake recognized the species from his briefings. A Drexian, members of the hive mind collective that controlled several major trade routes. "I am Node 7 of the Drexian collective," it announced. "We have observed the human performance and determined that your species may pose an unpredictable element to galactic stability. We require full disclosure of your capabilities, or we will move to restrict human expansion. The room fell silent with the weight of the threat. The Drexians had significant political power, and their opposition could cripple humanity's chances of integration. Jake looked at Amy, who gave him a small nod. They had known this moment might come, when humanity would have to reveal more about themselves than they wanted. I'll submit to whatever tests you want, Jake said calmly. But you should know that I'm not special among humans. I'm just trained. Vexter made a sound that might have been disbelief. Not special, he repeated. You defeated a Varax warrior in single combat using techniques that we have never encountered. Because you have never needed them, Jake replied. Commander, every species here evolved with natural advantages. Armor, enhanced strength, telepathy, bioweapons. You developed technology to augment what you already had. But humans had nothing. We were soft, slow, weak prey on a world that wanted to kill us. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the vast expanse of the station. We survived because we learned to adapt faster than anything else. He continued. Our brains became prediction engines, constantly analyzing threats and calculating responses. We learned to read body language because we couldn't read minds. We developed complex martial arts because we had no claws. We created endurance hunting because we weren't fast enough to chase prey. Tyler was recording everything on her device, her crystalline features reflecting fascination. So this adaptability is common among humans, she asked. It's fundamental to what we are. Ben interjected. Every human has the capacity to learn and adapt. Some just develop it more than others. Jake spent 15 years in special operations, learning to survive against superior opponents. Note 7's black eyes fixed on Jake with unsettling intensity. We must verify this, it stated. The Drexian Collective cannot accept unsubstantiated claims. If humans possess abilities beyond initial assessments, we need comprehensive data over the next 3 days. Jake underwent a battery of tests that pushed him to his limits. Alien scientists from a dozen different species monitored his every move, measuring capabilities that humans themselves had never formally quantified in a problem-solving facility. He was presented with alien puzzles designed for species with different cognitive structures. The researchers expected him to struggle with concepts foreign to human thinking. Instead, Jake approached each puzzle methodically, identifying patterns and underlying logic that transcended species-specific assumptions. He solved challenges in hours that typically took days, not because he was smarter than the aliens, but because human brains were wired to find connections and adapt strategies on the fly. In the endurance chamber, they pushed his physical limits. Jake ran on anti-gravity treadmills, lifted weights that adjusted to his strength, and maintained focus through scenarios designed to break concentration. What shocked the observers was not that he performed well, but that he improved rapidly during the tests themselves, his body and mind adapting to each new challenge in real time. Most significant test came in the psionic chamber, a facility designed to measure latent mental abilities. Most species with any psionic potential showed baseline readings even if they had no formal training. Humans had tested negative for psionic abilities in initial scans, but Tyler insisted on a deeper examination when Jake entered the chamber. The equipment immediately began registering anomalous readings. He wasn't telepathic in the traditional sense. He couldn't read thoughts or project mental images, but his brain was doing something the equipment wasn't designed to measure, processing micro-expressions, environmental cues, and behavioral patterns at a speed that appeared almost precognitive. A head researcher, a floating being of pure energy named Lux, expressed what everyone was thinking. He's not reading minds, Lux explained to the gathered scientists. He's reading everything else. Every movement, every environmental change, every subtle cue that indicates intention. His brain processes this data so quickly that he appears to predict actions before they occur. Dr. Kyle Warren arrived from Earth shortly after the test concluded, brought in specifically to explain human evolutionary biology to the galactic community. The human scientist stood before an assembly of alien researchers, his presentation hologram showing the harsh reality of Earth's evolutionary crucible. Earth was not kind to early humans. Kyle began, his voice steady and professional. We evolved alongside predators with better senses, faster reflexes, and natural weapons. Saber-toothed cats, giant bears, venomous snakes, even other hominids competing for the same resources. The hologram showed reconstructions of prehistoric Earth, where humans appeared fragile and vulnerable compared to the megafauna surrounding them. We survived through social cooperation and cognitive flexibility. Kyle continued, our brains developed the ability to rapidly assess threats, create tools, learn from mistakes, and pass knowledge to future generations. Each challenge forced us to adapt or die, and over millions of years, this created a species that specializes in overcoming disadvantages. Vexter, who had attended every test and presentation, finally stood. I owe your species an apology, the Corthan commander said, his voice carrying none of its earlier arrogance. I judged humans by the standards of species who never had to overcome their weaknesses. I see now that what I perceived as limitations are actually the source of your greatest strength. Amy, who had been advocating for Jake throughout the testing, allowed herself a small smile. This was the shift they had hoped for. Not just acceptance, but understanding. Node 7 remained skeptical. Adaptability is admirable, the Drexian representative said, but it also makes humans unpredictable. Chaos in a galaxy that values order. Jake had remained quiet during most of the discussions, but now he spoke directly to the Drexian. You see us as chaos because you value conformity, he said without hostility. But adaptability isn't chaos. It's evolution in real time. The galaxy is changing, new species making contact, new technologies developing, new challenges emerging. Humanity offers something you need, the ability to face the unknown without fear. Tyla stepped forward, her report complete. Based on my analysis, humans represent a unique cognitive profile in galactic civilization, she announced. They lack traditional enhancements but possess extraordinary behavioral flexibility. I recommend full integration with specialized roles in problem solving, tactical planning, and adaptive response situations. The recommendation carried weight, coming from Zenith Station Senior. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Council granted humanity provisional membership, and Zenith Station had transformed into something Jake barely recognized. Where once human presence was barely tolerated, now humans worked alongside dozens of alien species in positions of genuine responsibility and respect. Jake stood in the new Human Integration Center, watching through the transparent walls as the latest training session unfolded below in the main arena floor where he had once fought Krath. A Corthan officer was now sparring with a human instructor named Chris Porter. Chris was demonstrating the same adaptive combat techniques that Jake had used, but refined and formalized into a teaching system that aliens could understand and aptly. Vexter approached from behind, his heavy footsteps announcing his presence long before he spoke. The commander had become one of humanity's strongest advocates over the past months, and his friendship with Jake had developed into genuine mutual respect. Your instructor is quite skilled, Vexter observed, watching Chris guide the Corthan through a complex defensive sequence. He makes it look effortless. That is kind of the point, Jake replied with a slight smile. Efficiency over effort, adaptation over strength. These are human principles that translate across species once you understand the underlying philosophy. They walked together through the corridor that connected to training facilities, passing groups of mixed species engaged in everything from tactical planning exercises to cultural exchange programs. A Zantari scientist was explaining human problem-solving methodologies to a group of young researchers from various worlds in another room. Humans and aliens collaborated on adapting human endurance training techniques for species with different physiological structures. I spoke with the council yesterday, Vexter said as they walked. They are moving to make humanity's membership permanent. The provisional status was merely a formality at this point. Your species has proven its value beyond any reasonable doubt. Jake felt a sense of satisfaction at the news, though he tried not to show too much emotion. That is good to hear, he said simply. Earth will be pleased. They reached Jake's new office, a space that reflected his role as special consultant to the Council's Security and Integration Division. The walls were covered with screens showing various projects across the galaxy. Humans serving on exploration vessels, working in research facilities, teaching at alien academies, and participating in diplomatic missions. How is the Drexian situation? Vexter asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer, but wanted Jake's perspective after the assassination attempt. Tensions with the Drexian collective had remained high for several weeks, but gradually, pragmatism had won out over fear. The Drexians began to see that human adaptability could be useful rather than threatening, especially when applied to problems that their rigid hive mind structure struggled to address. Actually improving, Jake admitted. Node 7 contacted me last week requesting human consultants for a logistics problem they are having in the outer territories. Apparently, our ability to improvise solutions is exactly what they need when their standard protocols fail. Vexter made a sound that Jake had learned to interpret as amusement. The species that tried to assassinate you now wants your help, the commander said. Only humans could turn mortal enemies into reluctant allies in half a solar cycle. We are used to it. Jake replied, human history is full of conflicts that eventually became partnerships. We learned a long time ago that yesterday's enemy might be tomorrow's ally if you give them a reason to change their mind. A chime indicated an incoming message, and Jake's screen lit up with a communication request from Sophie Chun. He accepted, and the diplomat's face appeared, looking pleased. Jake, I wanted you to hear this directly from me. Sophie began without preamble. The Council just approved a major expansion of the Human Integration Program. We are authorized to bring 5,000 more humans to various positions throughout galactic space over the next year. Jake felt his heart rate increase despite his attempt to remain calm. 5,000 humans spreading throughout the galaxy, teaching, learning, working alongside species who had once dismissed them as primitive. That is incredible, said. Meaning you and Amy did this. We all did this. Sophie, correct, but you started it, Jake. Your victory over Krath was the first crack in their assumptions. Everything that followed came from that moment when you showed them the humans were more than they appeared. After the call ended, Vexter placed one of his massive hands on Jake's shoulder. She is right. The commander said, I have been thinking about that fight often, not because of the combat itself, but because of what it represented. You could have lost. Should have lost by any logical calculation. But humans do not think in terms of should or should not. You think in terms of how they walk to the observation deck. A vast space with transparent walls that offered a view of the entire station and the star. Field beyond dozens of ships came and went, representing civilizations from across the galaxy, and now human vessels were among them. Small at first, but growing in number. Do you ever regret accepting Krath's challenge? Vexter asked. Jake considered the question seriously. That moment in the plaza 6 months ago had changed everything. Not just for him, but for all of humanity now. He finally answered, regret requires believing you made the wrong choice. I made the only choice I could make. Because that is what humans do. We face challenges head-on, even when the odds seem impossible. Movement below caught Jake's attention, and he saw Krath entering the training center. The Varax warrior had become an unlikely friend after their arena match, and he now helped train other species in understanding human combat philosophy. Krath spotted Jake through the transparent wall and raised a clawed hand in greeting. Jake returned the gesture, still amazed at how much had changed. I should go meet him, Jake said. We are supposed to review the new curriculum for the advanced tactical program. Vexter nodded. Before you go, I want to thank you, the commander said, his tone unusually serious. For what? Jake asked. For teaching us that strength comes in forms we never considered, Vexter replied. The Korthans have relied on unnatural armor and weapons for so long that we forgot the value of adaptability. Your species reminded us that evolution is not just about what you were born with, but what you become through effort and determination. Jake met the alien's glowing eyes. You gave us a chance when you could have dismissed us forever, he said. That took its own kind of strength. The strength to admit you were wrong and change your mind. They parted ways, and Jake made his way to the training center as he walked through corridors now bustling with mixed species. He reflected on the journey that had brought humanity to this point. It had started with dismissal and contempt, with aliens who saw humans as nothing more than soft, weak prey species who got lucky with technology but through demonstration and determination. Humans had shown the galaxy something more important than natural weapons or armor, the ability to overcome any obstacle through intelligence, creativity, and refusal to accept limitations in the training center. Jake found not just Krath, but a whole group waiting for him. Amy was there with several other human delegates, along with alien representatives from a dozen different species. Stella Kane stood at the center, her crystalline form catching and reflecting light in mesmerizing patterns. Jake. Perfect timing, Tyler said. We were just discussing the next phase of integration. Several species have requested human advisors for their exploration programs. They want your species' perspective on encountering the unknown. It made sense. Jake realized humans had spent their entire evolutionary history encountering the unknown and surviving it, where other species might rely on superior technology or physical advantages. Humans had learned to assess, adapt, and overcome that made them ideal for exploration and first contact situations. I will need to assemble a team, Jake said, his mind already running through candidates. People with the right mix of skills and temperament. Already done, Amy said with a grin, pulling up a list of names. We have been preparing for this. Special operations personnel, scientists, diplomats, all trained in cross-species communication and adaptive problem-solving. Jake scanned the list and nodded approval. These were good people. Humans who understood that representing their species meant more than just succeeding at assigned tasks. It meant showing aliens what humanity could become when given the opportunity. The meeting continued for another hour, discussing logistics and protocols for the expanded human presence in galactic space, but Jake's mind was already moving forward, thinking about the future. A young Korthan officer approached after the meeting ended. Looking nervous, Consultant Morrison, he began, his translator making his voice sound hesitant. I was hoping I could ask you something. Of course, Jake said, giving the young alien his full attention. I have been studying your combat techniquest, Korthan continued, but I struggle with the underlying philosophy. My species has always believed that strength comes from our natural advantages. How do you teach someone to fight without relying on what they were born with? Jake smiled, recognizing the question as one he had answered many times over the past months. You do not stop using your natural advantages, he explained patiently. You just stop relying on them exclusively. Humans learned to use tools because we had no claws. We learned strategy